The story everyone later whispered about did not begin with shouting or chaos. It began with silence. A glass-walled boardroom, 12 executives seated, one woman standing, and a man at the head of the table counting down her career like time on a bomb. I had worked at Vertex Solutions for 6 years. I built systems no one else understood, fixed failures no one ever knew happened, and kept the company alive more times than the quarterly reports admitted. I was also the CEO's daughter-in-law. That detail mattered more than my resume, though not in the way I once believed. Nicholas Harrington stood across from me, expensive suit, calm smile, eyes sharp with certainty. He did not raise his voice. He did not explain. He simply said, "You have 5 minutes to clear your desk." Then he looked at his watch. The room stayed frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. The kind of silence that comes when everyone knows something irreversible has just happened. I smiled. "Thank you," I said, and stepped away from the table. That single word landed wrong. Nicholas frowned slightly. He had expected pleading. Tears, anger, anything except calm. Behind him, I saw confusion ripple through the faces of people who had approved budgets I saved and praised strategies I designed without ever saying my name. 4 minutes, he announced. I walked out of the boardroom and into the open office floor. My desk sat exactly where it had for years, facing the windows, clean, organized. I pulled a cardboard box from under the desk and began packing slowly. A notebook, a framed photo of my team, a hard drive taped beneath the drawer, each movement deliberate. Through the glass walls, I could see them watching. Nia Blackwood leaned back in my chair, checking her nails, already acting as if the space belonged to her. She had been training under me for months, or so I thought. Her smile was thin and satisfied. 3 minutes, Nicholas called out again. Then something changed. Logan Mitchell stood up from his desk, no hesitation. Laptop bag already over his shoulder. He didn't look at me, he didn't look at Nicholas. He simply walked toward the exit. Nicholas turned sharply. "Sit down," he snapped. Logan didn't. Priya stood next, then Marcus, then Sarah. Chairs scraped back, screens went dark. One by one, people I trusted, people who had built this department with me, rose in silence. Nia's smile vanished. "What is happening?" Nicholas demanded, his voice tight now. No one answered him. I lifted the box, heavier than it should have been, and walked toward the elevators. The sound behind me was unmistakable. Footsteps, many of them. By the time the elevator doors closed, 22 people stood beside me. No speeches, no applause, just quiet loyalty. As we descended, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. Whatever Nicholas Harrington thought he had just destroyed was already gone, and he didn't yet realize what he had set in motion. The elevator ride felt longer than it was. No one spoke. The hum of the cables and the soft ding of passing floors were the only sounds. I stood in the center, box in my hands, surrounded by people who had just abandoned stable jobs without a single discussion. When the doors opened to the lobby, sunlight spilled in, sharp and unreal. The receptionist froze mid-motion. A security guard stopped walking. Every eye followed us as we stepped out together. "Is this planned?" someone whispered behind me. "No," Logan said quietly. "It's finished." We crossed the lobby in a single line. No rushing, no hesitation. The guard who had escorted me earlier stopped, unsure if he was supposed to stop all of us. He didn't. Outside, the parking lot buzzed with traffic and normal life. It felt wrong, like the world hadn't been informed that something had just broken. Phones began vibrating almost at the same time. Messages, calls, alerts. Someone laughed once, short and disbelieving. Someone else cursed under their breath. Inside the building, chaos was already spreading. On the 15th floor, Nicholas Harrington stood in the boardroom doorway watching the empty desks through the glass walls. His authority had always worked instantly. Orders followed. People complied. This time, nothing moved. "Get them back," he snapped at no one in particular. Nia stood beside him, pale now. "They'll calm down," she said quickly. "They're emotional. They'll come back once they realize." Realize what? That the systems they ran no longer had owners. That the contracts they managed were now unsupported. that the department Nicholas had just gutted was the only reason the company functioned. Margaret Lawson, the legal director, was already on her phone. Her hand shook slightly. She didn't look at Nicholas. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked him quietly. "I fired one employee," Nicholas said. "They followed her. That's insubordination." Margaret didn't answer. She was calculating. Witnesses, public termination, hostile action. 22 resignations tied to one event. Downstairs, I set the box into my car and finally looked at my phone. Messages flooded in, internal channels exploding, clients asking questions. A single email from an unknown sender stood out. "Heard what happened, call me, CW." I didn't call yet. Across town, Nicholas stormed into his office and slammed the door. He called emergency meetings, demanded reports, asked for access to systems he hadn't touched in years. That was when the first error alert appeared. Then another. Then silence. Nia sat at her desk staring at her screen, clicking refresh again and again. "That's strange," she muttered. "These permissions should still." The screen went blank. Nicholas felt it then, not panic, not fear. The first flicker of it. Loss of control. And he had no idea it had only just begun. The betrayal did not start in the boardroom. It started quietly, 3 weeks earlier, at a Sunday dinner that looked harmless from the outside. Nicholas Harrington's house was built to intimidate. Long table, expensive silence, family portraits that felt more like warnings than memories. I sat beside my husband, Taylor, smiling when expected, speaking only when addressed. Nicholas raised his glass. "Another strong quarter," he said. "Vertex is stable because leadership stays disciplined." His hand rested on Taylor's shoulder, not mine. Nia sat across from me, perfectly composed. She laughed at Nicholas's jokes, asked him questions that made him feel important. She did not look at me once. After dinner, Nicholas pulled me aside. "I want you to mentor Nia more closely," he said. "She has potential. Show her how things really work." It wasn't a request. The next Monday, she started asking questions, detailed ones. How do you reroute systems during failure? Who controls backup access? Where are the client escalation files stored? I answered, I always did. That was my job. By the second week, she had access she didn't need. Files she shouldn't have seen. When I asked Nicholas about it, he waved it off. "She needs exposure," he said. "Don't be territorial." Then came the crisis. A system migration that should have taken weeks had to be done overnight. Everything failed at once. Data corruption, power instability, no margin for error. I called my team. They came without question. We worked through the night. No executives, no recognition, just fixes. By morning, everything was stable. The company never knew how close it came to collapse. Nia wasn't there. 2 days later, I received the email. It was addressed to me by mistake. "Nicholas, I've handled the Henderson situation. The client was impressed with my crisis management. I believe we should discuss restructuring. She seems overwhelmed. A leadership change might help the department." I read it twice. Then a third time. Nia had taken credit for the crisis she never touched, and Nicholas had already been discussing it with her. That was when I understood. This wasn't competition. It was replacement. I forwarded the email to myself and closed my laptop. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't warn my team. Because whatever Nicholas had planned, he hadn't told me yet. And people like Nicholas never strike without making sure the room is full of witnesses. 3 weeks later, he gave me 5 minutes. And thought that would be enough. The morning everything collapsed started wrong. The security guard avoided my eyes. The elevator ride was silent. When the doors opened on the 15th floor, the office felt paused, like people were waiting for a signal. I reached the boardroom early. My presentation was ready. Numbers, proof. 6 years of work condensed into slides that showed exactly how much money my department had saved the company. Nia was already there. She sat in my seat. Her laptop was open. On the screen were files I recognized instantly. Internal budgets, access logs, salary structures, documents stored on a server she was never authorized to touch. "Oh, good morning," she said lightly. "Nicholas asked me to review these before the meeting." I didn't sit down. "How did you get access to those files?" She looked up and for half a second the mask slipped. "Not guilt, satisfaction." "Temporary admin privileges," she said, "for the transition." Transition. The word settled between us like a verdict. Executives began filing in. No one met my eyes. David from finance sat stiffly, scrolling through numbers too fast. Margaret Lawson kept checking her phone. The coffee machine stayed untouched. I started the presentation anyway. Our department exceeded performance targets by. The door slammed open. Nicholas walked in like a storm. His face was red, his tie crooked. He didn't sit down. He crossed the room and slammed his hand on the table. "This meeting is over," he said. "You're done here." The clicker was still in my hand. Slide 17 glowed behind me, a graph showing millions saved. "You've been unstable," Nicholas continued. "Overwhelmed. This company needs stronger leadership." Nia leaned back in my chair. "You have 5 minutes to clear your desk," Nicholas said. "Security will assist." The room didn't react. No gasps, no objections, just quiet shock. I looked at Nicholas, at Nia, at the executives who had approved my work for years. Then I smiled. "Thank you," I said. That was the mistake. Confusion crossed Nicholas's face. 4 minutes, he said sharply. I walked out without another word. Behind me, Margaret's pen slipped from her hand and hit the table. No one picked it up. By the time Nicholas realized this wasn't going according to plan, I was already packing. And the damage he had planned for me was starting to turn in the opposite direction. I packed slowly on purpose. Notebook, drive, folder, nothing rushed, nothing emotional. Through the glass walls, I could feel them watching, waiting for something to break. 2 minutes, Nicholas announced. His voice wasn't as firm now. I slid my chair in, lifted the box, and turned toward the exit. That was when Logan stood. No announcement, no eye contact, just movement. Nicholas turned sharply. "What are you doing?" Logan didn't answer. He picked up his bag and walked. Priya stood next. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She silenced it and followed him. Then Marcus, then Sarah. Chairs moved, screens shut down. The sound spread across the floor like a signal. Nia sat up straight. "This isn't appropriate," she said, too fast. "This is a professional environment." No one looked at her. Nicholas stepped into the hallway. "Everyone sit down," he barked. "This is an order." No one stopped. Margaret Lawson finally spoke. "Nicholas," she said quietly, "you should stop this." He turned on her. "Stay in your lane." Margaret's face went pale. I reached the elevator with my box. Logan stood beside me, then Priya, then the others. One by one, they filled the space. Nicholas watched from the end of the hall. His authority had always been immediate. Today, it wasn't working. "Time's up," he said. The elevator doors closed. Inside the car, 22 people stood shoulder to shoulder. No one celebrated. No one spoke. When the doors opened at the lobby, phones started vibrating again. Messages multiplied. Internal systems alerting users to missing administrators. Upstairs, Nicholas slammed his office door and demanded access reports. "Why can't I open this?" he snapped at it. Nia's hands shook on the keyboard. The credentials should still be active. They weren't. The system didn't recognize her. The system didn't recognize Nicholas either. For the first time since Vertex was founded, the company was running without the people who actually understood it. And the silence that followed was not empty. It was waiting. The alert started quietly. One system warning, then another. Nothing dramatic, just red icons appearing where green ones had always been. Nia refreshed her screen again. "That's not possible," she said. "These permissions were approved." Nicholas stood behind her, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Fix it." "I'm trying." She wasn't. She didn't know how. Across the floor, department heads were already calling emergency meetings. Finance couldn't access live projections. Client services couldn't pull account histories. The internal dashboard lagged, then froze. Margaret Lawson watched the numbers roll in. Delays, errors, missed handoffs. Each one small on its own, together dangerous. Nicholas, she said carefully, we need the systems team back, at least temporarily. They walked out, he snapped. That's on them. Another alert flashed, this one louder. A client escalation. Then two more. Nia's voice dropped. The customer database isn't syncing. What does that mean? Nicholas asked. It means I don't know. It shouldn't do that. She clicked into the recovery panel, the screen filled with unfamiliar options. She hesitated, then selected one. Wait, Margaret said sharply. Did you follow protocol? Nia didn't answer. She ran the process. The system stalled. Then crashed. For a full second, nothing happened. Then the error messages flooded in all at once. Connection lost. Recovery failed. Data integrity compromised. Nia's face drained of color. It's just a temporary issue, she said too quickly. I can fix it. You just made it worse, Margaret said. Nicholas slammed his hand on the desk. Call it. They were part of the walkout, someone said. Silence spread. Across town, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Please don't hang up, Margaret said. Her voice was low, controlled, but tight. I'm calling from the executive restroom. What happened? A pause, then, Nia tried to prove she didn't need you. Another pause, she deleted the customer database. I closed my eyes. How bad? She attempted a self-recovery, used unverified software. It corrupted everything. Another pause, East Coast operations are down. I didn't respond. Nicholas's voice echoed faintly through the phone. He was yelling, throwing something. Margaret continued, conservative estimate is 50 million in losses. 50 million. And Nicholas. He's realizing, she said, very slowly and very loudly. I ended the call and sat still. 3 weeks ago, they decided I was replaceable. An hour ago, they decided they didn't need me back. Now, Vertex Solutions was bleeding in real time. And Nicholas Harrington still didn't understand the worst part. This wasn't revenge. This was the cost of pretending loyalty was disposable. I didn't go anywhere after the call. I sat in my car with the engine off, phone in my hand, watching the building across the street without seeing it. Messages kept coming. From my team, from numbers I didn't recognize, from people who suddenly remembered my name. I ignored all of them. When I pulled into the driveway, Taylor's car was already there. Of course it was. He worked from home 2 days a week, a privilege granted by his father, one I had never been offered. He opened the door before I reached it. Why are you home? He asked. Then he saw the box. His expression shifted too fast. Confusion, worry, calculation. Dad called, he said. He said you lost control in the meeting. I stepped inside and set the box down. Is that what he said? He said you were emotional, that you'd been struggling, that Nia had to step in. I took out my phone and opened the forwarded email. I handed it to him without a word. Taylor read it once, then again. This was 3 weeks ago, he said slowly. Yes. And you didn't tell me. I watched his face waiting. Would you have believed me? He didn't answer. His phone buzzed, he glanced at it, then again, his shoulders sagged. The database is gone, he said quietly. Dad's losing it. The board is demanding explanations. I nodded, I know. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was seeing me from the outside for the first time. He wants you to help fix it. I laughed once, it surprised both of us. He fired me in front of 12 executives and gave me 5 minutes to leave, I said. Why would I help? Taylor rubbed his face. He's offering severance, a lot, and a non-disclosure. He wants this contained. Contained how? Quiet, he said. No lawsuits, no press, no competing company. There it was. Not an apology, not regret. Control. I need you to fix this, Taylor said. The words landed heavier than the firing. I looked at him, at the man I had defended for years. The man who had watched me be dismantled and then asked me to put the pieces back together for his family. I need you to leave, I said. He froze. What? I need space, I said, right now. He hesitated, then grabbed his keys. I just need time to think. So did I said. I didn't get it. The door closed behind him. An hour later, my phone rang again. Margaret Lawson. Nicholas is realizing what the witnesses mean, she said, and what your contract says. I leaned back against the couch. Good, I said. Because whatever happened next was no longer about saving Vertex. It was about who survived what they'd started. Margaret didn't waste time. They're pulling your contract, she said. The one from 6 years ago. Nicholas never read it. Legal drafted it after the last public termination scandal. I sat up. What clause? The hostile termination clause, she replied. Public humiliation, witnesses, damage to reputation. I stayed silent. The multiplier alone puts your severance far above what he offered, she continued. And now, there's the walkout. 22 employees leaving directly after your firing ties everything together. Across town, emergency board calls were stacking up. Nicholas was demanding answers. The answers were turning on him. He's blaming me, Margaret said. Says I failed to stop this. Did you? No, she said flatly. You followed procedure, he didn't. A pause. I need to protect myself, she added. And I need to be honest with you. If you pursue this, Nicholas could lose everything. I looked at the box still sitting by the door. 6 years reduced to cardboard. He already chose that, I said. That night, the internal channels leaked. Screenshots spread, messages forwarded. Someone created a private group called Exodus before it shut it down. By then, hundreds had joined. Employees, former employees, people who had been fired the same way and never spoken up. Patterns surfaced. Public terminations. Power plays. Silence bought with settlements. Nicholas tried to get ahead of it. He scheduled a press briefing for the next afternoon. Strategic restructuring, leadership realignment, temporary disruptions. Nia was supposed to stand beside him. She didn't show. Instead, she locked herself in a conference room and kept trying to restore the system she had destroyed. Every attempt made it worse. At 2:07 a.m., my phone rang again. She ran unauthorized recovery software, Margaret said. She didn't call it. She didn't tell anyone. How long has the database been down? 8 hours and counting. I closed my eyes. That's not all, Margaret added. The board just accessed your contract. Nicholas is asking how bad it can get. And no one is answering him anymore. Across the city, Nicholas Harrington sat alone in his office watching dashboards fail one by one. His company was still standing, but the structure underneath was collapsing. He thought firing me had ended a problem. Instead, it exposed one he could no longer control. And by morning, it wouldn't be private anymore. By morning, Vertex Solutions was hemorrhaging. Client portals stayed offline. Support lines flooded. Executives stopped asking what happened and started asking who authorized this. No one wanted ownership anymore, not of decisions, not of consequences. At 7:12 a.m., Nicholas called an emergency board session. At 7:13, the board's private channel exploded. He didn't open with confidence, he opened with denial. This is a temporary disruption, he said. The data will be restored. A board member cut in. By whom? Silence. Nia has the situation under control, Nicholas said finally. Margaret looked down at her notes. She didn't speak. Then why are we losing clients? Another voice asked. Henderson just froze their contract. Nicholas's jaw tightened. They're overreacting. The CFO leaned forward. They received notice that their configuration data no longer exists. That changed the room. Nia finally spoke, her voice shook. The data isn't deleted, it's fragmented, I just need time. How much time? Someone demanded. She didn't answer. The board muted her. Nicholas's screen filled with messages, his assistant whispering urgently off camera, security reporting press in the lobby, IT confirming the corruption was spreading through backups. Then the question he hadn't prepared for. Why was she given full administrative access? All eyes turned to Nicholas. He hesitated, just long enough. That was my decision, he said. Margaret closed her folder. The board ended the call without a resolution. No vote, no reassurance, just an instruction: contain damage. An hour later, Nia's access was revoked. Too late. At 9:30 a.m., my phone lit up again. Unknown number. Your team just rebuilt what we thought was unrecoverable, the voice said, in less than 2 hours. Who is this? I asked. Someone who's been watching, the caller replied, and taking notes. I hung up. By noon, 3 competitors had reached out. Subtle messages, careful wording, all saying the same thing. If you're open to a conversation, we are too. Inside Vertex, panic had replaced authority. Nicholas threw a laptop against the wall. Security was called, not for intruders, but for him. Nia was escorted out of the building quietly through a side exit. Her name vanished from internal systems by afternoon. By evening, the board requested Nicholas's resignation. He refused. They didn't argue. They adjourned. The company stock dipped another 5% before market close. And Nicholas Harrington still believed this was a setback he could talk his way out of. He hadn't realized yet that the people who used to protect him were now protecting themselves. And none of them were taking his calls anymore. The first official call came that night. Not from Nicholas. From his lawyer. Ms. West, the man said calmly, my client would like to resolve this matter privately. I said nothing. He's prepared to offer a severance package well above standard, immediate payment, extended benefits, a written recommendation. And, I asked. And a full non-disclosure agreement, he added. No public statements, no legal action, no competition for 2 years. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Across town, Nicholas was pacing his office, phone glued to his hand, waiting for confirmation that this would disappear the way things always had. Money, silence, reset. He still believed this was negotiable. What happens if I decline? I asked. A pause, then we proceed formally. Good, I said, because that's already happening. The line went quiet. Inside Vertex, the damage spread faster than the press releases could contain it. Clients didn't wait for explanations. They pulled contracts, froze accounts, demanded exit clauses. The board scheduled another meeting, this time without Nicholas. Margaret called me from her car. They're reviewing historical terminations, she said. Patterns, witnesses, settlements. Are they looking at mine? I asked. They started with yours, she replied. At 11:47 p.m., a message appeared in my inbox. Your team's loyalty is worth more than his entire company. Let's talk. CW. I read it twice. Inside Vertex, Nicholas finally understood something was wrong when security asked him to leave his own office. Not permanently, not yet, but enough to rattle him. This is my company, he snapped. For now, the guard replied. Nia sat alone in her apartment staring at job boards that stopped replying to her applications. Her name was already circulating, not loudly, quietly, the worst kind. By morning, the story leaked. Not the technical failure. The walkout. 22 employees leaving after a public firing. Social media picked it up first, then industry blogs, then financial news. Nicholas's name trended, not for success, but for control. The offer doubled by noon. I didn't answer. Because the moment he offered money wasn't the moment he realized he was wrong. It was the moment he realized he was vulnerable. And that was the moment the balance shifted for good. Margaret asked to meet in person. Somewhere neutral, she said, somewhere he wouldn't think to look. We met in a quiet hotel conference room just after sunrise. No branding, no cameras. She arrived with a banker's box and locked the door behind her. He's unraveling, she said, and he's looking for someone to sacrifice. She opened the box. Inside were folders, dates, names, notes written in precise legal language. Every public termination, Margaret continued, every forced resignation, every time he humiliated someone to make a point. She slid one folder toward me. This one is yours. Witness lists, board minutes, internal emails, including one where Nicholas explicitly wrote, make it public. She needs to be put in her place. I didn't react. He thinks money fixes everything, Margaret said, but he never planned for documentation. She pulled out a flash drive. Board meetings recorded, not officially, but clearly. You recorded them? I asked. I protected myself, she replied, for 12 years. She leaned forward. If this goes legal, he loses more than the company, his reputation, his board seats, any future influence. And you? I asked. He'll destroy me if I don't move first. I nodded. That afternoon, Nicholas's lawyer called again. The offer tripled. Still no apology. Still no admission. Just urgency. Inside Vertex, the board voted without him. Emergency authority transferred, his access limited, his assistant reassigned. At 6:18 p.m., Nicholas tried to enter the building. Security stopped him. Temporary restriction, they said. Temporary felt permanent. At 8:40 p.m., my phone rang again. Blocked number. I know you're enjoying this, Nia's voice said, cracked and uneven. But he ruined me, I just wanted a chance. You took one, I replied, and burned it. Silence. By midnight, the board drafted a resignation agreement. They didn't send it yet. They were waiting to see how far I was willing to go. And for the first time since the boardroom, Nicholas Harrington was no longer setting the terms. He was waiting for them. The board moved fast once fear replaced loyalty. At 9:00 a.m., Nicholas was informed his authority was suspended pending review. At 9:07, his resignation agreement was finalized. At 9:12, he refused to sign it. By noon, the press was waiting outside Vertex headquarters. Nicholas stood in a private office with 2 board members and his lawyer. His voice was sharp, controlled, but thin around the edges. You can't do this. I built this company. One of the board members replied calmly, you nearly destroyed it. They slid the document across the table. Resign quietly, retain partial equity, no public inquiry. Nicholas laughed once, she put you up to this. No one answered him. At 2:00 p.m., the press conference he had scheduled went live without him. An interim executive delivered a short statement. Strategic transition, leadership change, no questions. The market reacted instantly. Vertex stock dropped again. That same afternoon, I received a message from Catherine Walsh. 2 sentences, direct. I've reviewed what happened. Your team didn't follow you. They chose you. Let's build something. Inside Vertex, Nicholas packed his office alone. No countdown, no audience, just boxes and silence. Security waited outside. At 6:30 p.m., his resignation letter went public. By nightfall, his name was removed from the website. He went home to an empty house. Across the city, 22 people gathered in my living room. Laptops open, phones ringing, offers coming in faster than we could answer. Logan looked up. We can't go back, he said. No, I replied, we don't need to. Outside, news outlets replayed footage of the walkout. Analysts debated culture. Investors debated risk. Nobody defended Nicholas. And somewhere between those debates, something new started forming. Not revenge. Momentum. And this time, no one was counting minutes. By morning, the calls stopped being careful. They stopped asking if we were interested and started asking how fast we could move. Clients didn't want statements. They wanted continuity. Names, timelines, assurance that the people who actually understood their systems were still together. We were. Henderson Corp called first, no small talk. We're terminating Vertex, the CEO said, effective immediately. On what grounds? I asked. Competence, he replied, or lack of it. An hour later, Patterson followed. Then Morrison. Then 2 mid-sized accounts that Vertex had spent years trying to land and only kept because my team held everything together behind the scenes. By noon, we had numbers. 30 million in contracts ready to move, not promised, ready. But there was a problem. We didn't have a company. Yet. Logan cleared his throat. We can register today. Marcus shook his head. Clients won't wait for paperwork. Priya looked at me. They're not moving to a company, they're moving to us. She was right. We created a temporary structure, short-term service agreements, emergency compliance, enough to bridge the gap. At Vertex, executives realized what was happening too late. Emails went out offering retention bonuses, promotions, apologies wrapped in legal language. None were answered. At 3:14 p.m., a familiar name appeared on my screen. Nicholas Harrington. I didn't answer. He tried again. And again. Margaret texted a single line. The board advised him not to contact you. He ignored them. Of course he did. At 5:02 p.m., a black car pulled up outside my house. Eleanor Harrington stepped out. She looked smaller than I remembered. No smile, no confidence. I need to talk to you, she said. Inside, she didn't sit down. He did this before, she said quietly. To his own brother, same way, public, cruel. She placed a folder on the table. Old documents, old wounds. I stayed, she continued. I told myself it was business. She looked at me then. Watching him do it to you broke something I can't fix. I didn't respond. Outside, my phone buzzed again. Catherine Walsh. I'm in town, warehouse tour tomorrow. I looked around the room, at the people who had walked out with me, at the contracts lining up faster than we could read them. Vertex wasn't collapsing slowly. It was being hollowed out. And for the first time, Nicholas Harrington wasn't losing control because of a mistake. He was losing it because people chose not to follow him anymore. The warehouse wasn't impressive. Concrete floors, exposed wiring. No logo, no desks, just empty space and urgency. Catherine Walsh walked through it once slowly, then turned to me. This works. Logan blinked. This place barely has electricity. That's fine, she said. So did most billion-dollar companies at the start. She didn't ask for a pitch deck. She didn't ask for projections. She asked one question. Will they follow you again if it gets worse? I looked at my team. No hesitation, no side glances. Yes. She nodded and made a call. Send the papers, full seed. Logan froze. You haven't said the number. 3.5 million, Catherine replied. 20%, board seat. No one spoke. At Vertex, the board was in emergency lockdown. Analysts were calling it an unexpected talent migration. Internally, they called it something else. A breach. Nia's termination email went out quietly that afternoon. Strategic misalignment. No references, no defense. By evening, our temporary structure became permanent. A name was chosen, filed, approved. Phoenix Digital. At 11:40 p.m., the first funds hit the account. At midnight, the first contract signed. At 12:17 a.m., my phone rang. Nicholas again. I answered this time. You think you've won, he said, voice tight. You think this ends me. I think this already ended, I replied. You owe me, he snapped. I gave you everything. You gave me 5 minutes, I said. I used them. Silence. At Vertex, servers still limped along. Clients kept leaving. The stock bled quietly overnight. In the warehouse, laptops lit up one by one. Code deployed. Systems rebuilt. No chaos, just speed. By morning, Phoenix Digital had a valuation. By afternoon, Vertex had an investigation. And Nicholas Harrington, finally, understood something he never had before. Power doesn't disappear loudly. It just stops answering your calls. The investigation didn't begin with accusations. It began with emails no one replied to. Nicholas sat in his home office watching his inbox refresh. Board members who once answered in minutes now stayed silent. The interim CEO sent one line, please direct all inquiries through legal. Legal didn't answer either. At Vertex headquarters, auditors arrived before noon. Not announced, not welcomed. They asked for access logs, termination records, internal communications. Margaret handed everything over without resistance. She had been waiting for this. By midday, the press changed its language. Technical disruption became leadership failure. Analysts stopped debating numbers and started questioning judgment. At 1:30 p.m., the board reconvened. Nicholas wasn't invited. They reviewed the recordings Margaret provided. his voice, his orders, his instructions to make terminations public to set an example. No one defended him. At 3:00 p.m., a notice went out internally. All executive contracts under review. At 3:12, Vertex stock dropped another 7%. In the warehouse, we watched it happen in silence. Screens showed the numbers falling. Messages came in from former employees asking if we were hiring, from clients asking if we could onboard faster. We could. At 4:20 p.m., Catherine called again. Second round confirmed, she said. 2 more firms are in, they didn't even ask to negotiate. Why? I asked. Because they saw the walkout, she replied. They saw who people chose. Across town, Nicholas finally received a call. Not from the board. From a leaner. They've frozen the joint accounts, she said calmly. I'm filing tomorrow. Nicholas said nothing. That evening, the board issued a statement. Nicholas Harrington had stepped aside, pending review. His remaining authority was revoked. Security escorted him out of the building one last time. No audience. No countdown. Just a badge that no longer worked. As night fell, Vertex Solutions wasn't dead. But it was empty. And Phoenix Digital signed its 5th major client before midnight. Nicholas Harrington sat alone, refreshing a news feed that no longer mentioned his name with respect. The collapse wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. And irreversible. The call came after midnight. Blocked number. I answered without greeting. I know you won, Nia said. Her voice was thin, stripped of confidence. Everyone knows. I didn't respond. They fired me, she continued. No reference, no severance. My access logs are being reviewed. I waited. I didn't think it would happen this fast, she said. They said I acted without authorization, that I ignored protocol. You did, I said. A sharp inhale, Nicholas promised. He promised himself, I cut in. Silence stretched. I just need one thing, she said. One recommendation, something neutral. I'll disappear. I won't talk. I pictured the boardroom, my chair, her smile. You already wrote your recommendation, I said. It's in the audit trail. She started crying then, not loud, controlled, like someone who finally understood the weight of their choices. I thought power meant proximity, she whispered. I thought if I stayed close enough. It means competence, I said, and accountability. The call ended without goodbye. The next morning, her name appeared in an internal compliance memo. Not public, worse, permanent. At Vertex, damage control had shifted to survival. Executives resigned quietly, departments dissolved, contracts renegotiated under pressure. No one wanted to be associated with what the investigation was uncovering. Margaret called me from her office, calm as ever. The board is preparing a settlement, she said. They want this over before regulators step in. And Nicholas, I asked. They gave him a choice. Resign with partial dignity. Or be removed with cause. He chose resignation. The announcement went live at noon. Nicholas Harrington steps down after internal review. No praise, no farewell. Inside Phoenix Digital, we watch the notification flash across screens. No celebration, just confirmation. At 2:00 p.m., a courier arrived with documents. Settlement terms. Numbers higher than before. Conditions softer than expected. But still one demand. Silence. I closed the folder. This wasn't finished. Because Nicholas Harrington still hadn't faced the one thing he feared more than loss. Witnesses who remembered everything. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. Neutral ground, downtown hotel. Conference room with no windows and no history. Nicholas chose the location. He still believed setting mattered. I arrived early with Margaret. Nicholas came late. He looked smaller, not weaker, emptier. His suit hung loose. His confidence didn't enter the room with him. No greeting. His lawyer slid the documents across the table. This settlement closes everything, he said. No litigation, no press, no future claims. Margaret didn't touch the papers. Before we discuss numbers, she said, there's something the board asked you to acknowledge. Nicholas stiffened, Acknowledge what? The manner of termination, she replied. Public, coercive, hostile. Nicholas laughed once, this again. Margaret pressed a button on her phone. His own voice filled the room. Make it public, she needs to be put in her place. Nicholas froze. Margaret let it play for 10 seconds, then stopped it. There are 43 minutes of recordings like that. The silence that followed was absolute. Nicholas looked at me, really looked this time. You recorded me. I survived you, Margaret said. There's a difference. His lawyer swallowed. We recommend signing. Nicholas didn't move. Refuse, Margaret continued calmly, and this goes to regulators, to the press, to every board you sit on. He exhaled slowly. The pen shook in his hand when he signed. When he slid the papers toward me, our eyes met. You destroyed everything I built, he said quietly. No, I replied. You just ran out of people willing to cover for you. He stood without another word and walked out. 2 hours later, the settlement cleared. By evening, Eleanor filed for divorce. By night, Nicholas's access to company assets was frozen pending final review. At Vertex, his name was removed from internal systems completely. At Phoenix Digital, we onboarded 3 new hires before midnight. The fall wasn't loud. There were no cameras. No countdown. Just a man who once ruled rooms, realizing too late that power doesn't survive without consent. And consent had already left with the elevator. The money arrived before dawn. No message, no explanation, just a number sitting in my account exact to the cent. The settlement was finished. On paper, everything was over. In reality, it was just entering its final phase. At Vertex, regulators requested full access by mid-morning. Not optional, not negotiable. The board didn't resist. They couldn't. Too much had already surfaced. Margaret called once. They're asking about the recordings, she said, and the walkouts, and the access permissions. And Nicholas. A pause, he's not cooperating. By noon, his lawyer withdrew representation. Conflict of interest officially, unpaid fees unofficially. Inside his empty office, security footage captured him standing alone, staring at the desk where decisions used to be made for him. He stayed there for 20 minutes, didn't touch anything, didn't sit down. Then he left. The footage ended. That same afternoon, a press leak confirmed what everyone suspected. Internal misconduct, abuse of authority, patterned behavior. Not criminal, yet, but enough to end careers quietly. Board members resigned one by one. Vertex Solutions was acquired within 48 hours. Not merged, absorbed, the name retired. At Phoenix Digital, the pace accelerated. We finalized infrastructure, locked in contracts, hired compliance before growth, no shortcuts, no favors. At 6:30 p.m., I received a message from an unknown contact. He's trying to start over, calling former partners, nobody's answering. I didn't reply. Later that night, Eleanor sent one line. He moved into the guest house, alone. No follow-up. At 11:17 p.m., another message arrived, this time from a journalist. He's asking if you'll comment. I declined. The story didn't need my voice anymore. It had documents, footage, numbers, witnesses. The next morning, Nicholas Harrington's consulting profile went live. New title, new photo, 3 likes. 2 were bots. 1 was a sales pitch. At Phoenix Digital, we held our first all-hands meeting. No speeches, no celebration, just alignment. Outside, rain started falling. Inside, screens showed stable systems running under our name. And somewhere across the city, a man who once counted down 5 minutes realized something too late. Time only works when people stay. And everyone had already left. The divorce papers arrived without drama. Taylor signed them the same day. No calls, no arguments, no last attempts to explain. He transferred what he owed and disappeared into a life that no longer intersected with mine. Vertex Solutions officially ceased to exist a week later. The acquisition announcement was short, assets absorbed, brand retired, no legacy language, no tribute, just an ending. Former executives scattered. Some found work quietly, Others didn't. No one mentioned Nicholas in interviews. It was as if saying his name carried risk. At Phoenix Digital, we crossed 50 employees. The pace was relentless but controlled. Clients onboarded smoothly. Systems scaled without emergency patches. Decisions were documented, no surprises. One afternoon, Margaret walked into my office with a tablet. "He's trying again," she said. Nicholas's latest post was on screen, a paragraph about leadership, resilience, and rebuilding after adversity. The comments were empty. "He applied for an advisory role at a startup I represent," she added. "They forwarded me his resume." And, I asked. They asked if the rumors were true. I didn't answer. Margaret smiled slightly. I told them they were documented. The application vanished by evening. That night, Eleanor called. "I moved out," she said. "Filed everything, no reconciliation." "You okay?" A pause. "I'm clear," she replied. "That's better than okay." At Phoenix, a new contract landed. Global, high stakes. The kind Vertex had chased for years and never closed. We signed without fanfare. Across town, Nicholas refreshed his inbox. Nothing. No callbacks, no meetings, no second chances. The silence wasn't punishment. It was confirmation. Everything that had protected him was gone, not taken, withdrawn. By choice. And there was no way back into rooms that no longer needed him. The break was complete. Permanent. And quiet, the story ended the same way it began. Quietly. Phoenix Digital's valuation crossed a number people whispered about instead of saying out loud. The systems held. The client stayed. The team expanded without chaos. No emergencies, no countdowns. One afternoon, while reviewing contracts, I received a notification I almost ignored. Security footage available, Vertex archives, final release. Margaret had sent it. I opened the file. The footage showed the old boardroom. The same glass walls, the same long table. The timestamp was late at night, days before Vertex was absorbed. The room was empty except for one person. Nicholas. He stood at the head of the table, hands resting where authority used to live. He checked his watch, looked up, checked it again. No one was there. He spoke, but there was no audio. Still, his lips were clear. 5 minutes. He waited. Nothing happened. He sat down alone. The footage cut. I closed the file. That evening, a junior analyst asked me a question during a review. What made everything change so fast? I didn't answer immediately. Because it hadn't been fast. It had been precise. 5 minutes in a boardroom. 22 people standing up. One system without its real owners. One decision exposed to witnesses. Across town, Nicholas Harrington worked from a rented office above a tax service. No assistant, no board, no leverage. His calendar stayed empty. The industry moved on. So did we. At Phoenix Digital, we launched a new division that week. No announcement, just execution. No one counted time, no one threatened it. Late that night, I stood alone in the office, lights low, screens running smoothly. No alarms, no alerts. Just stability. Nicholas once believed 5 minutes was enough to end someone. He was right. He just ended the wrong person. You have reached the end of the text.